Hello, my name's Jodie Brunning. I'm with the Physicians and Scientists for Global Responsibility in New Zealand, and today I'm talking about fluoride. And many local councils have been faced with instructions from the Director General of Health to install a fluoridation plant or fluoridation equipment in order to fluoridate the drinking water. Now, these local councils are faced with fines of $200,000 if they don't install by the date, plus an extra $10,000 for every day thereafter. Now, some of these towns are as small as, say, Kawerau, with only about 7,500 people. So the title of this talk is Uncertainty about Pending Challenges to the Lawfulness of Ministry of Health Fluoride Directives to TLAs, to Territorial and Local Authorities. Local districts have been poorly served by the actions of the Ministry of Health, the Environment Protection Authority, and the Select Committee process in New Zealand. Ministry of Health studies on fluoride and the prevention of dental caries demonstrate that there may be, but this is inconsistent, a marginal reduction in the prevention of some dental caries. This marginal decrease must be lawfully balanced against other risks to health so as to protect health. And risk includes risks to brains and bones, the main target organs of fluoride. Now, the rule of law in a democracy is founded on constitutional and administrative law principles. Certain rights, opportunities, and obligations follow. New laws must be reasonable, and processes and procedures followed by officials and elected members must promote trust based on cost-benefit, and they must be based on balancing risk with benefit. So it is the duty of every local authority to improve, promote and protect public health within its district. And the purpose of the Water Services Act is to provide safe drinking water to consumers. And you'll be aware that safe in the latter act includes other causes together with the consumption or use of drinking water. You may consider that Auckland and Wellington have been fluoridated since the 1960s and that extending fluoridation there is based on solid grounds. Now, with respect to the current state of scientific evidence, solid grounds don't exist. When did the Ministry of Health consider the lowest safe level of exposure of fluoride in drinking water in combination with existing levels of fluoride in young children? So are counsellors listening aware that fluoride exposures in 5 to 7 year olds in New Zealand are higher than older age groups? Now, that's a 2018 study by the Centre for Public Health Research that appears to have been ignored by agencies and by the 2021 Inquiry Committee. How much fluoride should be added to prevent harm from prenatal exposures up until age 7, for example, based on Bay of Plenty data? So since the 1960s, studies showing an association between levels of exposures to fluoride and neurodevelopmental, cognitive and IQ risk, particularly for exposures during pregnancy and up to 7 years, has been consolidating. And please note, as the European Food Safety Authority states, fluoride is not a nutrient. And where commonly ingested nutrients have upper limits, often by orders of magnitude, for fluoride, the margin is unknown and slim. And fluoride is a known neurotoxin, but our authorities do not discuss this. So in the 50 years of fluoridating Wellington and Auckland, the New Zealand EPA, Environmental Protection Authority, have never conducted a risk assessment either of emissions to water or to assess the lowest limit where neurodevelopmental risk and other problems such as skeletal fluorosis, ADHD or even Alzheimer's may occur. Administrative law requires that decision makers take into account facts which contribute to the risk. Now, this has not been undertaken in New Zealand. The legislation permitting the Director General to mandate fluoridation of water, which has potential to adversely harm particular subpopulations, is primarily based on two reviews in 2014 and 2021 by the Office of the Prime Minister's Chief Science Advisor, a non-regulatory body who had no terms of reference, no methodology to demonstrate that impartial processes were followed. The 2021 update, their advisory committee, was overweighted with experts with a bias towards dental and oral health. Indeed, the author of one of the papers, which was heavily weighted in the 2021 update, was on this committee with oversight. I think the courts would regard such a bent panel dimly, and there were no experts with a particular expertise on neurodevelopmental or cognitive risk on this panel. Then let us appreciate two submission processes to government committees, to parliamentary committees, one in 2016 and one in 2021. And despite thousands, indeed most submissions from the public expressing great concern for the safety of fluoride and health risk, neither committee took it upon themselves to consider the public's cause for alarm. In fact, both committees dismissed public comments, claiming that fluoride safety was outside the scope of interest. Now, massive reviews of literature by globally recognised institutions are rare, and the US-based National Toxicology Program, the NTP, reviewed the literature on cognitive and IQ risk. Now, it's evident from this paper that the guideline limit of 1.5 milligrams per litre, which was established in 1984, is now arguably unsafe. The global debate now rests around the issue of whether the current claimed safe level of 0.7 milligrams per litre is safe or not. The most expert scientific committee in the world will not say that this 0.7 milligrams per litre level is safe. And their case rests upon multiple studies at many different levels, and the fact is no lower limit of exposure has been demonstrated to be safe for cognitive risk and loss of IQ, for neurodevelopmental risk. The NTP study looked at New Zealand's Otago broadbent study. NTP scientists were far less favourable of the broadbent study than the OPM-SCA. Now, the NTP consider that there are multiple uncertainties in that paper. The OPM-SCA did not carry out the meta-review that this large NTP study did. And despite 50 years of dosing Auckland and Wellington, none of the multiple brain research institutes in New Zealand have carried out a study to look at the safe lower level. We do have many problems with cognition and IQ in our young people. And so there can be no claim that fluoridation is not a factor in this. Exposures and brain risk are generally not studied in New Zealand. The current exposure levels of our children were not considered by the OPM-SCA nor the Ministry of Health, even though the data was available. There seems to be a very slim margin between exposure levels and so-called safe levels as required by the Water Services Act. So mean 5 to 7-year-old urinary levels were 0.74 milligrams per litre, while the average of all children in the 2018 study was 0.63 milligrams per litre. So 5 to 7-year-olds appeared to have an 18% higher level of fluoride in their urine. So if we think about the mean level of under 18s, for example, in the Bay of Plenty in this study, the mean was 0.502 milligrams per litre. If we add an 18% factor, because the study didn't specifically look at levels here, so if we add an 18% factor to estimate higher exposures in 5 to 7-year-olds, potentially they are sitting at 0.593 milligrams per litre, nearly 6 milligrams per litre. Now, drinking water suppliers are going to add 0.7 milligrams per litre and above. Kids most developmentally vulnerable may already be at that level. So exposure levels may already be quite high, and it is understood that if only half of urine is excreted with the rest absorbed into bones and tissues and at high levels for younger children, we do wonder if for example, Tauranga City Council has taken account of this. We know that the Ministry of Health hasn't taken account of this issue. Is there a plan within, for example, Tauranga City Council or any of the councils across New Zealand to take account of local exposure levels in local children? And what TCC may also be uninterested in, but perhaps is relevant, is that fluoride is highly reactive. It has a strong negative charge. It binds to heavy metals, to lead and copper. So once fluoridation of drinking water is included, this of course affects all water, not just the 5% or the 5% that is consumed as drinking water. This will go through old infrastructure, the old state houses and old buildings. So this may explain some part of the reason why maybe Dunedin or Wellington has a problem with pipes and leaky pipes. This strong negative charge is also important for considering that fluoride may bind up valuable nutrients such as magnesium and molybdenum, and this may impact bioavailability for nutrients, and this may be connected to nutritional benefits, including mental health and cognition. So for a marginal and highly uncertain reduction of dental caries, we wonder if local councils have taken into account this risk-benefit, if the risk-benefit calculation currently considered or failed to be considered by the Ministry of Health, by the select committees, is appropriate, and if the science really has been considered. So government processes leading up to the passing of the legislation, which transferred power to direct drinking water to be fluoridated to the Director General of Health, do not appear on the surface to be fair. So compulsory fluoridation potentially impacts personal rights and interests. Perhaps for local councils, a delay in chasing up tenders and signing contracts might be appropriate. We do understand that local councils are very fearful of the $200,000 fine, and they are very anxious not to impose costs on their citizens. However, the public do deserve to understand whether the decision to fluoridate was reached justly and fairly, and we wonder if local councillors do not deserve to hear this as well. Thank you for listening.